Where has the Doctor gone?
Back to the beginning, I should think.
Pull to open!
Yes, and what do you do?
I walk in eternity.
What's that supposed to mean?
Dear Lord, how do you cope with all that ego?
Is this a story, or did this really happen?
Every story ever told really happened.
Here! Come!
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in random order. My name's Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal. We're a couple of guys, writers, journalists who have been loving and writing about Doctor Who pretty much their whole lives.
We've been stepping into the TARDIS frequently.
Yeah, and encountering the various incarnations of the Doctor and various incarnations of ourselves. It's quite a journey.
Usually when I step into a TARDIS, it's an American diner. It's kind of a curious coincidence. Then, though, should we be talking about American Diner TARDISes this week? As we cover Hellbent.
That's true. That's the show we are going to be talking about this week. So we have other things.
Let's do a quick recap of how we got here. We got here very appropriately from Day of the Doctor.
Yes.
The 50th anniversary special and a special episode with the amazing Elisa Stern. And that has been doing pretty well on all of our social feeds and other internet presences, right, Pete?
It's been doing well everywhere. First of all, I gotta thank Elisa for coming out. It was amazing. She leveled up the commentary incredibly well. For those who don't know, Elisa Stern is also known as Dr. Puppet, the brainchild of all. Well, Dr. Puppet is the brainchild of hers, and it was such a compelling. It's not active anymore, but it was an amazing YouTube series of great, cool videos. But she's an amazing Doctor Who fan, and thanks in part to her amazing fan base, that is now our most successful show ever. Again, we were already on an upward turn. I don't want to sell ourselves short here, but Elisa did level us up, and it not only is it our most successful on the socials, it's just our most successful download, most listened to episode, and I'm really glad it was because we came to Day of the Doctor pretty early in our run of all of the Doctor Who that we still have yet to talk about, but
it is the most viewed Doctor Who story in history.
That's true,
and it is appropriately enough our most listened to podcast, and it seems to be sparking lots of conversation on TikTok.
That's true. Yes, there's a lot of response to your theory about regeneration, Chris,
and people were adding to it as well. So for those who didn't hear it, the theory on regeneration is that the Doctor imprints on whoever you talk to last. At least this is true in the New Who era. Whoever you talk to last, for example, the War Doctor talked to Clara, and then he regenerates into Chris Eccleston, who likewise, like Clara, has a northern accent, Lancashire-ish accent, and and that this continues throughout the run. Eccleston turns into Tennant, and because he's talking to a Londoner, picks up a London accent, and so on and so forth. And this sort of basically works with every new Doctor. With Jodie's a little bit different. She sort of imprints on her companions immediately after she crashes into a train full of them, but picks up their accent. And in fact, I'm indebted to the people on TikTok who mentioned that Russell T Davies had said something similar about the Doctor imprinting on the first people he meets after he regenerates.
Right.
In fact, apparently he called the Doctor an egg in that sense. Just whoever shatters through the egg and sees the new person, like he imprints on, they're his mother.
So I might not have been the only one. We didn't talk about this because obviously I didn't want to get too far into the weeds on your theory, but if you think about the old series, I mean, you just go like, well, English, throughout. Except, but the one thing where it screws it up is Davison, who he talks to Perry right before he becomes Colin Baker. Now, wait a second. Now, I thought about, I'm gonna, hit Chris with this. It's like, so much for your theory, Chris. Next time we talk. But you know what actually happens in that episode?
Yes.
He has all the visions
he does
of everyone else before, and that's all like new footage, right? Like that was all like cool stuff. And the last person that he sees is the Master.
Yes. No, you must die, Doctor. Die.
It actually boosts your theory because that's why he turned into such a jerk.
Yes. There we go. I was literally going to mention that. He basically is doing his best Anthony Ainley. I was actually prepared until you reminded me that that's what happens in Caves of Androzani. I was thinking, no, it's he tried to go for an American accent, but his brain just sort of exploded, and that's why he's so weird in the Twin Dilemma. And tries to strangle Perry, or I was thinking maybe the accent comes out in his coat, but no,
right, yeah.
But no, you are absolutely right. Thank you for saving me from that. The theory holds; it lives on.
Yeah, exactly.
Frankly, we don't even need to get into Classic Who because I think part of my theory is that this only happens after the Sisterhood of Khan intervenes in his regenerations.
So part of that elixir, yeah, it sort of actually changed his process. I love it. Wow, the head in here is just exploding everywhere.
It's just like the Doctor when he regenerates now. Yeah.
But TikTok has been great. Please follow us there. We're at Pull to Open on TikTok. Straight up, we're doing more and more videos all the time. We're doing our recaps there as well. The community is growing. We're at about 2,500 followers now, which is impressive. We've grown quite a bit even since the last time we were on. Last time I talked about it, which was, I think, the last podcast. So keep them coming. We're definitely going to have a prize for our 10,000 follower. Tell your friends, and watch for more.
Yes, absolutely. And we're definitely, with a lot of our posts, we're getting 10,000, 20,000, even 30,000 views. So we're definitely punching above our weight on TikTok. It's been very interesting to see the discussion explode as well. People are not shy about sharing their views, sharing their version of the theories.
How about that? That communities on the internet are brazenly bold with their thoughts. Who knew?
But we love it. We love reading it.
Well,
so
that's
keep
the great
it coming.
thing. The Doctor Who community is just honestly such a great community. I mean, they're all very passionate. They're all like super fans of the show. I admit that might be a little intimidating for some people on the outside looking in, but honestly, I find them all to be just great. Like even the people who are kind of they're calling us out before about the Cyberman stuff, most of them are actually really nice about it and responded well to that, to our responses as well as the response video we have, which is now pinned on our profile if you want to see it. It's from our special episode from a few months back. Anyway.
People get very passionate about it, but it is definitely one of those fandoms where, even if you've just seen a few episodes, you're in. You're inside the TARDIS, and in many ways you know almost as much as the rest of us, right?
Absolutely.
As we will come to discuss in this episode, the extent of Doctor Who mythology it's sort of very broad, but it's not very deep.
Yeah,
in terms of how much we know.
So speaking of passion and super fans, for those of you who are super fans of this podcast, and we know you all are, we would love to see some more reviews on the various services you're subscribing to. So if you're listening on Apple in particular, it would be amazing if you could go over to your podcast app and leave a rating or a review. We're not going to tell you what to write or what to put, but those 5-star reviews, certainly we have a special place in our hearts for them, and we'd love to read your review out on the podcast. And so if you guys could do that, if you're compelled, if you like what you're hearing, please leave us a review. If you don't like what you're hearing, leave us a
review anyway. Tell us why.
This has been the Daily from the New York Times. Seriously, we do want to hear from you guys. Go ahead and comment on TikTok, send us to Twitter. Feel free to leave a review if you don't like it, but we hope you like it. 5-star reviews really help. Yeah,
if you don't like the show, my name's Joe Rogan. And you've been listening to my experience. Yes, so we should mention, speaking of reviews, we are in the midst of new Doctor Who, and we're in an interesting situation here where I have watched both episodes of Doctor Who Flux so far.
I have watched 0. Not that I'm not a fan, guys. I've been busy. I'm sorry. I've also been saving up because I know it's a serialized thing, and I've been trying to avoid spoilers. But please, Chris, tell us what's going on. Not what's going on, but
I don't. So, for Pull to Open veterans, that in previous episodes we discussed whether the most important question about Flux, of course, is not, what is it going to tell us about the Doctor? Is it going to continue the Timeless Children scenario? Is it going to redeem the Chibnall reign? No, the most important question is it one story or is it like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stories for our codex? For the number, because as you know, we are going through this show through Doctor Who randomly. We are being guided by our randomizer, which is drawing on a database of stories called the Codex. And it was an open question for a while whether Flux was going to be one story or a bunch of stories. I think having seen the first 2 episodes without any spoilers, I can safely say that while they bear resemblance to chapters, it's very much the same story.
Oh, okay.
Which is not the same. We're going to be talking about this in the show with Hellbent, right? The big question of is Hellbent a standalone or is it part of a trilogy?
Yeah,
we decided the format. I think with good reason, especially compared to Flux, Flux is much more of a Trial of Time Lord kind of thing, but even more so, like Trial of Time Lord was clearly a bunch of stories stitched together. And while there is, the second episode, it's not a spoiler to say there are a lot of Sontarans in it, but it's definitely continuing the same story, same characters show up. I don't think there's enough in there to mark it off as different. So bottom line, this will be the 298th entry in the Pull to Open Randomizer Codex.
Interesting. Okay, so I was already starting a draft of Codex 2.0 the other way, but I haven't seen it. So, I'm trusting you on this. Now, that the new edition of the Codex will not be ready, I think, until Flux is complete.
Yes, yeah. So we will still be randomizing our way through all of Doctor Who so far, and I'm sure that the randomizer will make us watch every single Capaldi episode before any other Doctor is featured. But the other thing for interested Pull to Open listeners and Pull to Open the podcast is the Pull to Open actually at some point in episode 2, again not spoiling anything, the Pull to Open sign vanishes from the TARDIS. So the TARDIS becomes impossible to enter, and
had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, someone has stolen the Pull to Open sign. Luckily this is not a permanent state of affairs, but yeah, very, very briefly, I did wonder, Pete, whether we were going to have to change the name of the podcast or just, make it a Classic Who and New Who up to this point podcast. And, maybe there would be no more Pull to Open sign on the door.
Wow. Guess to open. Knock to open. Yeah.
Click your fingers to open.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Right?
Yeah, and we'd built up all that sweet SEO, and now they take the damn sign off the TARDIS store. But you'll be relieved to know that even though the sign still says Pull to Open, Jodie still pushes.
Good. Yes.
It's essential that the Doctor does that. Never actually pulls to open.
That's right.
So that's Flux. I will say that I'm kind of liking it. I think it's a phrase that came to mind when I was watching it was big budget, slow burn.
Okay.
As in they've definitely pulled out a lot of stops. Visually speaking, it looks very nice. I think the story is growing on me. Definitely felt better in episode 2 than episode 1. Dan is definitely growing on me as a new companion, and I'll be very interested when you see it, Pete, how you feel about the Liverpool accents in the show, because I know for some Americans those Liverpool accents can be a little bit impenetrable. If you're more broad than the Beatles.
It took me a little while to get used to the fam, honestly. Yeah. So. Now I feel pretty comfortable with it, but we'll see how it goes. So slow burn, huh? Well, I've got to say, since we're doing a lot of Classic Who in our podcast, if it's we've done Inferno, man. You talk about slow burns. I mean, that's not. I love Inferno, but it's those old episodes. I mean, think about the War Games, right? Some of this stuff took a while to get going, but
it definitely
I think
has
newer
that.
Audiences might be a little more skeptical. We'll see.
It has that classic series feel, and I think that seems to be what Chibnall was going for with this, especially as he chose the classic Sontarans over the new look ones. You'll
I'm
definitely,
here for it.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. This is kind of a theme, like that even sort of began before Chibnall, I would say. This sort of retro Who, which might have been fueled a bit by fans, in that the old Cybermen came back and we did that one, and that's actually we didn't do that one. We did the 10th Planet. What am I saying? But then the idea that hey, these classic monsters actually do work, and you don't have to do a lot of modern polish to make them still really compelling. Surround them with the story, and the fans will come halfway. I think there's a whole new generation of fans now that really appreciates that. Because if you look at sort of even just Doctor Who Twitter, the amount of classic Who love that is there on a consistent basis it kind of surprises me sometimes that there's so much of it.
Yeah, I think it sort of helps that it's exotic, right? It's different from anything else you might see in the rest of nerddom. And it has that appeal to it. It's the London's 1965 effect.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah,
it feels
the only thing
very
Twitch ever did that was awesome. Was that
feels very rich and meme filled for all its earnestness. Cool. So more to be said about Flux in the coming weeks and months. But for now, let us turn to the story we're talking about today, Hellbent.
The Series 9 finale, which is 262 in the story number officially, but 264 in our codex.
Yeah.
Ask us about our formula. You get a chance.
So what the randomizer's done is it took us to Face the Raven.
Mm-hmm.
Then it took us to Day of the Doctor straight from Face the Raven.
That's right. Yeah.
And now it's taken us to Hellbent. So it's basically showing us the trilogy.
Oh no, sorry, it didn't. It was Face the Raven, then the Idiot's Lantern.
Idiot's Lantern. Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes.
A brief diversion to London, 1953.
Then it was Day of the Doctor.
Then it was Day of the Doctor. And now what I think the randomizer is doing is it can't get enough of the barn. The Doctor's barn, the shack. So it's going for all barn stories, and I fully expect that Listen will be the next choice, because we know it loves the barn, we know it loves Capaldi, and
you gotta wonder about that Airbnb listing for that barn. Galactic Airbnb. It's like spacious outdoor Gallifreyan rural dwellings.
Yes.
Lots of straw.
All the straw you can sleep on, all the soup you can consume.
With the great views of the capital.
Locals will come hang around and watch you eat at your discretion.
Danger of Time War at any time, but a steal at this price.
But before we get too far into it, we come to that point in the show.
Damn, my Airbnb stall didn't work. Okay.
It is time for TLDW. Too Long Doctor Who, or Too Long Didn't Watch, in which we summarize the plot of the story that we've just watched, and we take it in turns. And Pete Bashall's your turn this week.
We'll summarize in record time.
Summarize.
1 minute, right? That's what we do?
1 minute. What's what we do for New Who.
Okay.
Let's see.
I've got to do this sight unseen. There's got to be no tabs. I obviously have not prepared anything. It's other than just sort of reading a couple of plot summaries and watching the episode. So now I'm okay.
Yeah, nothing up your sleeve. YouTube viewers will note that I'm not holding up cue cards for Pete to read from. This is all done live and without a net. So, Pete, you ready?
I'm ready, as I'll ever be.
I'm going to give you a countdown. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, the Doctor's just busted out of his confession dial, and he is on Gallifrey, and he tells some kid that, hey, he's back. And lots of people come to gather around him. He goes to his barn where he used to be, and then all these soldiers come, and eventually he waits everybody out. The forces of the Rassilon to come, and Rassilon's the president, and everyone turns against Rassilon, and basically makes the Doctor president of Gallifrey. He kicks Brusa off. Why do I keep saying Brusa? It's Rassilon. And they go to the Capitol and they're trying to
30
figure out what
seconds.
the hybrid is, which has been the whole plot of this season. What's the hybrid? It's going to destroy the universe and time. And so the Doctor goes and gets Clara out of her time screen in an instant before her death using Time Lord technology, and ostensibly because she has information on the hybrid. But he uses that to rescue her and tries to get away from Gallifrey with the stolen TARDIS. But this actually turns them into the hybrid because that's the fractured time. So it can't go with her, and then she goes off with me because she's at Ashildr's at the end of the universe, and there's something happens there with a diner, and someone loses their memory. Clara loses it, I guess. No, wait, Clara doesn't lose it. The Doctor loses it. Like her was going to use it, and everyone sort of meets, and then they all go off in their respective TARDISes.
All right, you did it. You did it in 1 minute 30.
That was the worst I've ever. No, I didn't even get it, man. That was total chaos at the end. That's a D minus. I feel so ashamed.
I tell you what, Pete, it is. I do not envy you because it's a tough plot to summarize. A lot happens without really sort of seeming to happen.
Yeah.
A lot happens without sort of explanation. Motivations are weird and all sorts of over the place. And I have to say, I did not give Hellbent a very good grade when I reviewed it the first time. I remember well that it came out December 5th, 2015, a day that will live in infamy. But no, not really. I was actually on book tour in Brazil when this came out, and I had to do the review for Magical, so I'd been reviewing the entire season. So I remember, like, waking up very early in the morning to watch it and then filing a review immediately and just being so disappointed, having loved Heaven Sent so much, that this was like, we went from the best of Moffat, where he was pared down and it was, just this beautiful, tiny story, strung out into billions of years, very self-contained. And then to come back to this ultimate Moffat-y mess, it just seemed like a slap in the face. But I have to say, watching it again, I really kind of liked it. I liked it. I've made my peace with Hellbent because of this show. I really appreciate it, Randomizer. Watching it separately, I think, A, justifies our decision to make each part of the trilogy separate. But it just sort of makes it like it's a wonderful Western in the early part of the show. We could talk about all of the references. The lack of dialogue is beautiful. It sort of feels like you're jumping into the middle of something, but it's not so bad because you don't feel so let down after the glory of the confession dial episode.
There's definitely like a lot going on here, and a lot of the ingredients are very good. I ultimately think, though, the end result of this is not a fully formed thing.
Right.
It's not. It doesn't come together, to use the most common criticism that I would use for something like this. Yeah, it's very much like really good dialogue, really good set pieces, great actors. Like, they brought back some of the best people from Day of the Doctor and that whole saga. And, Capaldi and Coleman are both really good together. And they, they have, their best scenes are still back in Face the Raven in wrapping up Clara's storyline, but there's still some really good stuff in this one. I thought the stuff in the diner was good, but ultimately it's kind of like what you said when we were talking about the plot. It doesn't feel like a lot happens by the end. You're kind of there. You're just going, like at the end of the day, you're just kind of like, oh, that was kind of cool. But you're not, it doesn't quite do what you think a finale should do, which is kind of blow you away, change things, or even like give like a big cliffhanger. And I know that's not what he was trying to do, but it's still, it's like, wow, that was kind of cool. And now I'm, going to go have a drink or watch some sports because I can't. There's not a lot to react to.
Yeah, it's visually very good. I think that's what I came to appreciate the second time. That I could see through my burning rage this time. But other than visually, and a few jokes that landed better this time around, and the whole the thing with Clara in the diner became more poignant, where you slowly start to realize that it's the Doctor who lost his memory, not Clara. That's a nice twist. Feels better second time around. Other than that, it is an attempt to wrap up a series of storylines in what almost feels like the least satisfying way possible for each storyline.
Yeah.
So we have the storyline of finding Gallifrey, which had been locked in this pocket dimension, somehow has gotten out of this pocket dimension and hidden itself at the end of time. How? Why? We are deliberately pushed away from learning how or why. We're just like, oh yeah, don't even ask. It's just the Time Lords. It's the kind of thing they do. The Doctor sees off Rassilon with barely, picking up a spoon and drawing a line in the sand are his only weapons, which is, I get it. It's wonderfully Doctorish. It's sort of reminiscent of the Pandorica opens, with the Doctor standing on the stone at Stonehenge with, calling it all the alien races. Come on, who wants to have a crack at me first? It's very, very good from that respect. It's very Moffat-y, that sort of standoff, one man facing off against the whole of Gallifrey. But there are so many unanswered questions.
Oh, God. Where to start?
And why did the Doctor suddenly, having seen off Rassilon, just suddenly become Lord President, which is a role that he has resisted repeatedly in the past? It's almost like Moffat wanted to follow the formula of the previous season, right, which we've seen with Dark Water, Death in Heaven. The Doctor becomes President of Earth. How can you top that? Well, the Doctor becomes Lord President of Gallifrey, after having found it after 4.5 billion years locked in a confession dial. Right.
Yeah, and then, honestly, they've this is also a place where they've had process before. Like there was in the Invasion of Time, and there was like a good chunk of the first couple of episodes they spend like how he gets the presidency, and it's all this sort of nomination stuff, and I guess we're just throwing that away, which is like it's fine to do, I guess, but it's also not fine in a way because it's like there's so much, basically Moffat essentially picks and chooses like what he wants to key in on, and he makes these weird decisions like cloisters in the Capitol and the cloister wraiths, which I'll admit, cloisters in the Capitol does make a bit more sense than cloisters in the TARDIS.
Yeah.
But it's like, what's this obsession with cloisters and bells?
I love that, actually. I love that we now have an explanation for why the cloister bell is a thing in the TARDIS that is tied into the Matrix, and its warning of bad stuff is being seen by the algorithms in the Matrix. That's kind of cool. I love any time Doctor Who kind of builds off his own mythology like that. The cloister bell has been around since Logopolis, but was never explained. And here in Hellbent, we finally get an explanation. I'm here for that sort of thing. What I'm not here for is, for example, the hint that the Doctor is half human.
Oh, you didn't like that? I actually kind of liked that because it was. I liked it because it was a clever wink to the TV movie without fully indulging that point of view.
Yes. But if you're going to, it was one wink too many. It was the wink that broke the camel's back, because there's so much winking. And the ultimate in winking is not even figuring out who the hybrid really is. It is left ambiguous. Is it me? Is it the Doctor? Is it me and Clara? Is it the Doctor and Clara? Is that, how we're told several times that saving Clara from the time stream, pulling her out before a moment of death, will destroy the universe somehow, or the Time Lords will be on her tail, or both. The Time Lords should be on her tail now because she hasn't lost her memory, which is why the Doctor was trying to erase himself from her memory so that the Time Lords couldn't track. It's just everything keeps shifting. The stakes keep shifting. I'm thoroughly confused at all moments as to what is happening, who's doing it, why does it matter, and why are you continually walking right up to the line, Stephen Moffat, of giving us more details about the Doctor, like did he have a human parent? And then the Doctor says, does it matter? And as the audience were like, yes, it matters. Tell us.
Like, this is the guy who wrote an episode, the name of the Doctor, and never gave it, right? Like, I mean, I think what you said there is very apt, or very accurate, which is to say that the stakes keep changing, and you're told this matters at various points, and this is the point of things, and then it's completely forgotten about. It's almost like into the next scene. So much is made about the Time Lords and their power and their authority, and at the end of the episode, they're made to be chumps. And by the end of the episode, they're made to be chumps, and the people that they're supposedly they care about and want to see punished or trapped or at least recaptured are still free, and so they don't care now. Like the Time Lords just have no stake in where Clara is or where the Doctor is or even what the hybrid was. Don't they care? Wasn't this whole confession dial thing about getting definitive answers on the hybrid and stopping it? So yeah, it's and you're just kind of like, okay, well, I guess
And
I was
then,
supposed to care about the Doctor's journey there, and that was fun, I guess.
and then we should talk about the diner thing, because just to make things even more complicated, the diner resembles the diner that the Doctor was in with Amy and Rory and River at the beginning of season 6.
Right.
It is apparently the same diner, but it's also Clara and me's TARDIS. So does that mean that the diner in Impossible Astronaut was also the TARDIS, or they just made it look like? And how does Clara know what that diner looks like? And it just brings up way more questions when what we need are questions being answered.
Yeah, it's kind of just a dumb thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like the production reason is they had the set, and so it's like, okay, well, we could just rebuild that set and we'd save some money, and then it's Stephen Moffat introduces the idea, like with the line, "Oh, now our chameleon circuit's stuck," which is like, oh, haha. Again, that to me that was a wink too far, but to say that we're an American diner, which seems to me to at least strongly imply that the diner for like in the Impossible Astronaut is the same one. But then what does that mean? Like, was Clara there and me there? And does that how does that even enhance that story in any way? It's just this sort of random thing that they put in that they hope people will think is clever, but it's really just an excuse to reuse the set and get an Amy and Rory reference in there. And it's like, if you're not going to have any payoff there or anything that makes sense, I'd prefer you just didn't.
It does rather feel like one of those stories where it's just everything was built around what would look cool.
Yeah.
So the Doctor walking into a diner with a guitar slung over his back like he's a cowboy, that works as an image. The Doctor being on Gallifrey, just sort of nodding to the woman in the barn who may or may not be his mother, and they don't actually share any dialogue. It looks cool. It doesn't necessarily work in furthering the plot, but it looks cool. It feels cool.
And there are great moments. I don't want to give the impression I didn't enjoy at least these elements of the episode. I did. Especially the diner stuff. The actual diner dialogue between he and Clara was really good. This is like Moffat at his best, right? Like, he's really easy way between the two actors, number one. And also, like, Moffat very cleverly, like, throwing in lines like, from time to time, when Clara asks him about if I forget what he asked. Yeah, so actually, like, what he plays or something. But it was funny.
She Space Glasgow. That was a good line.
That was my favorite. So that all really works, and I was actually found myself a little more into the diner stuff throughout because what I was invested in there as a fan is like, the big mislead, of course, is this really Clara, or is it like a splinter version of Clara, from the Matt Smith era where she gets split across his time stream? Because that, when Clara dies 2 episodes before the season finale, you kind of think, well, if they're going to bring her back, what are ways they could bring her back? And one is that, well, technically exists throughout his time stream. So you could like have Capaldi or whoever encounter her a bunch of times.
He doesn't need to go in the extraction chamber and pull her out.
Right.
It just, I get that, he just wanted to get from point A to B to C to D, and he kind of hit all his marks, but the result was an unsatisfying story. And one in which, this was what I really dinged it for in my original review, the Doctor uses a gun on a Time Lord. He basically, basically kills a guy. And I believe this is the only time this has happened in Doctor Who history. Pete, correct me if I'm wrong.
A guy. Yes. Do you count Cybermen? Those are guys.
Former guys. Yes, former guys and girls. In the
someone out there let me know, but I think this is really the only time the Doctor actually straight up shoots somebody.
This is it. And it feels like that was shoehorned in there in order to show, and I'm glad that we did see canonically that, a white male Time Lord can turn into a black female Time Lord. I think that was important to see. Gave us a lovely line about how it's regeneration's the man flu, and dear God, how do you cope with all that ego? So
it's
some
also
wonderful
like
lines there.
That change, just to pause on it for a second, is such a statement on old versus new. And you could say like in old Who versus new Who, or even, the values of older TV or older even British society versus new society. I think that was, you could read as much into it as you want, but I felt like it was clearly a statement.
But does the Doctor really have to kill off, an entire regeneration of the General?
It just doesn't.
To get there?
It still didn't sit right with me. I mean, I know it's like he makes the man flu joke, and Time Lords don't die per se, but we're supposed to feel it when it happens to the Doctor. And
exactly.
And people.
The guy was on his 10th regeneration, so this is basically, Tennant turning into Matt Smith. Well, actually, Tennant turning into Tennant, the crisis, meta crisis Doctor. But still, that was treated as a big deal. And it's, if you only have 12 lives, losing, turning from 10th to 11th, that's taken some years off your life, man.
Yeah. So and here's the thing though, like, I'm a little split on what Moffat's trying to do here. Because if he's trying to go all the way with Dark Doctor, this is what the hybrid is, and we're supposed to be disgusted by it and have some impact with, discovering he's the hybrid and then needing to cheer on that he's being stopped. Okay, that's good. I wouldn't do that in 5 minutes. Like, I would say, like, this episode would have been more effective and more lasted with us a little longer in terms of the consequences if after Clara died in Face the Raven, there was more time, more episodes of him going down into a dark path. And you really see like this War Doctor, in a sense, emerge from that. They didn't do that. And I think the reason, not the reason they didn't, but that choice of not doing that was actually very good and was what makes Face the Raven awesome, as we said in that podcast, where Clara brings him back from it before it can happen because she's there to remind him of who he is and what it means to be a Doctor. And it's a little like they do that again here, and it's like, well, didn't we just do that? And the idea that he descends into this dark place and comes back, that could have been good, right? Like that could have been like, okay, like I'm feeling it, and I might have had more of sense, like, oh, the bringing him back and discovering the hybrid would have mattered, but they just couldn't really go all the way with it because, like, if he didn't do that in the Time War, even like what how could this be that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of stuff where it's like you really didn't need to go that far to do that,
right?
In Hellbent, but I must say that the randomizer has part of the way that it has leavened this experience of watching Hellbent is the fact that you kind of buy it immediately when it is made clear that the Doctor's a war hero.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas if you've been watching the long way round, as it were, to use a phrase that is used multiple times in this episode, when you do it the long way around, you don't necessarily remember that the people at Gallifrey think of the War Doctor as their hero, the man who saved Gallifrey. But it does get to use a phrase from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It gets a bit needlessly messianic. Which there's this whole thing about the Doctor saying to Rassilon, "Get off my planet." Let's talk about Rassilon for a little bit as well, because part of the problem here is that we're coming from Timothy Dalton Rassilon,
I know.
who was just terrifying.
Well, he
And
was inspired casting. I mean, like, I know it's stunt
such a
casting, but it's also like, man, Timothy Dalton, bam, okay,
yes,
that's
to
gravitas, man.
seriously. And I guess they couldn't get him back, so they got a final British actor called Donald Sumter, I believe is his name, and he's good. I mostly, you may remember him as a maester in Game of Thrones. You may remember him from the very first episode of Black Mirror, where he's an advisor to the Prime Minister during that whole pig incident. That's certainly the one that's burned into my brain. But he definitely, he's much more of an understated actor. He doesn't have the gravitas of Timothy Dalton. And
Agreed.
as Rassilon, he's just sort of, I don't know if this was a deliberate choice to sort of make him look like Rassilon had been worn out, played out, and he just didn't have any of his charisma left, his powers. But yeah, this is definitely not the Rassilon of old.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Again, nothing against the actor. I think he's a certain type of actor. I just think he was miscast, right? Like, I think this, you kind of want to see why he's in charge. He just seems a little sad, and you almost feel sorry for him with the Doctor kind of like playing with him like this.
Yeah.
And he's just sort of like this old guy who's made to like go away. And I don't know, I feel like you kind of wanted someone almost like a little like Alan Rickman in the Harry Potter movies, who's a little more cold, a little more straight up, forceful and evil. I mean, I know that the character in those movies is always going back and forth, but it's like that idea of someone who's just more in charge. And otherwise, this guy, I don't know, he just looked like he was this guy from Downton Abbey or something who just had wandered into Doctor Who. And, they got rid of him real quick.
Yeah,
but all the Western stuff is good, though, I thought. Apart from, like, it's good, like, with him, with all the soldiers and stuff, there are elements I could pick at. Like, I think that the soldier says at one point, I served with him, in terms of the Doctor. And I think that's not quite a retcon of the Doctor's role in the Time War, but I kind of feel like it's not like he was a warrior for Gallifrey, per se. Like, I mean, he was and he wasn't. I don't know. Like, he wasn't part of like the Gallifrey army, which
he was kind of off the books. He was, you get to see this a little bit more in the audio dramas and the novels. But yeah, he was mostly on the Time Lord side, right? He wasn't 100% there, but he did see the Daleks as the bigger threat. And then, only at the end of the War Doctor's time does he decide that they're both as bad as each other. I'm going to blow them both up.
Right. I guess that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, I can buy that bit.
Again, and this is not really relevant to the story. So again, this is more fanboy criticism here, but it's like the idea, like all these people sort of gather around, and they just look kind of ratty, like they are from a Western, and you see the Capitol and sort of the buildings around the Capitol, and there's been stuff with the invasion of time, like it's never been clearly spelled out. Like, what the hell is going on with Gallifrey? Like, where are the people? I guess the implication was always they're in these two cities, the capital and Arcadia came later in the new series. But there's the Shobogans, I guess, in the wilderness. I guess these people aren't that, but they're sort of rural Gallifreyans. I don't need everything like in a manual. Okay, I'm not asking for that. Like, but it's like, an atlas of Gallifrey. But at least have it sort of make some sense, right? Like, give me a little bit more here on like who is who and what's the striations of this society, because you just kind of like, otherwise it's just sort of people appear when the script needs for it, and then they kind of aren't there when it doesn't. And okay, I guess, but you could write that way. It's just it'd be a little more satisfying in world building to give me some broad strokes of what all this is about.
Yeah, well, we do learn for the first time that barn is in the Drylands. I think it's the name of the area. Really inspired.
There are coldlands? And I feel like is there a Drablands, which would be like where the death zone probably is, and it's all just quarries,
Yes. Yeah,
most of Gallifrey is just quarries.
Honestly, it's really not much of a tourist destination. gotta say. You wonder why they had to stick it away at the end of time to hide it. It just could sort of be
The
hiding in
shuttle to
plain
that
sight.
Airbnb is murder, man. That's not. Yeah.
So they're hiding at the end of time, but it's not quite the end of time, because then the Doctor does go to the end of time and he finds me, quote unquote. And they're
Right.
still here. Moffat playing for the third or fourth time with the joke that when the Doctor says the hybrid is me, as he says at the end of Heaven Sent, the question of does he mean literally me, lowercase m, or capital me, Ashildr. Use that thing once. Do not use that like as a cliffhanger 3 or 4 times, because we know finally, it's not going to be another version of the Doctor standing in the ruins of Gallifrey.
It's nice to see me again. I like Maisie Williams. I think
For sure.
I like that character most of the time. This time I felt like it was very cameo-esque and very kind of like, oh, let's just have her back because we have her this season and there's kind of a story here. She doesn't really add anything other than, and like, I'm not sure where she picked up learning to wear the TARDIS, or learning to fly TARDIS, but I guess, she lived till the end of time, so she picked up everything.
Finally, she got round to that TARDIS Type 40 manual that she'd been putting off reading.
And I'll do the nerdy pick at like, she's the only thing that survived till the end of time. I mean, there's other like immortal stuff from everyone from the Sisterhood to, all the great intelligence like beings. I mean, I guess that the great intelligence is gone, but I mean, like all these other ones, like surely somebody else is there. Like they're all gone, really.
Apparently, Maisie Williams is the last immortal standing.
Yeah, which is weird because
but we need to see the sort of the Squid Game that led up to that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh wow, that would be an amazing season. Wow, the round robin tournament to see who survives the end of time.
Yes, dozens of Doctor Who immortals enter, only one leaves.
Oh man, dude, we are coming up with the best Big Finish seasons in this podcast.
Call us Big Finish. Call us.
The other thing is like, why does he go to the end of time? I guess it's essentially because that will reactivate Clara's heartbeat because it's so far away. But wasn't Gallifrey kind of already at the end of time? Like it's never quite or close to it. There's all these all this like big concept stuff, which is cool and it's what sci-fi's for, and I like it. But sometimes, like, this is Moffat, right? Sometimes he levels it up way too much, like beyond what you need, or he just kind of throws it in without really paying any mind to like, what is this actually doing here, and what is the reason for it from a story perspective? No, it's just cool.
So exactly. I just jammed in a couple of cool concepts. Oh yeah, she's the last immortal, and she's sitting in the ruins of Gallifrey. And this is the thing: is that the whole prophecy of the hybrid has been teased for the entire season, and the hybrid will stand in the ruins of Gallifrey, and we're just eventually led to believe that this is a Shaggy Dog story, where it's just they're standing in the ruins of Gallifrey because there's nothing left, because it's the end of the universe.
Right.
Great.
Well, interestingly, like, think about it though now, right? So assuming like, it's not like we need to revisit the hybrid storyline, but okay, now if we get into the Whittaker era where Gallifrey is in ruins, and we could maybe reinterpret that a little bit. Now, is it again the Doctor who's the hybrid as the timeless child who now stands in the ruins of Gallifrey, or is it the Master who brought Gallifrey to ruin? Maybe this prophecy never ended. And,
maybe. I think on a second viewing of Hellbent, my understanding as I wade through the jungle of Moffatiness is that we are led to believe right at the end that the hybrid was a prediction about the Doctor and Clara, and it was a prediction about what the Doctor would do and become in order to keep her safe.
Well, that's the orthodox view.
Yes. I guess there are other hybrid interpretations that we're finally led to believe at the end of the episode. But by that point, so many concepts are bouncing around your head. They're like, what is... And are they telling us this definitively? And is it going to just change again in another 5 minutes? This is the problem with you keep moving the goalposts on the story. and it just ends up being this super confusing mess. And then, Clara reverses the polarity on the memory device, and now we're even more confused.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
isolation, great idea. Jammed in with all these other concepts, I need to take a Tylenol.
Yeah, but I will say that the memory losing thing was a bit clever. It's reminiscent of those worms they used to have too. And Moffat sort of returns to the memory wipe thing as a plot device a few times. But in this case, I feel like, again, I do like when Capaldi and Coleman are at their best, and I think they are in both this episode and in Face the Raven. It alludes to some really great drama, and it's when it's suddenly apparent the doctor's the one losing his memory, like it's really played well, and you get those first lines. I mean, he repeats them when he regenerates, but the whole thing about the pairs and always remember to be never cruel or cowardly, all that stuff, like that's excellent. It's his sort of side of things from Clara got her moment in Face the Raven. This is kind of his moment in that relationship. But it ends up being played out as a very good scene, at least.
Yeah, the pairs thing. I'm glad I watched this for that reason, because I did not remember that he mentioned pairs at all, and then I was just like, watching Twice Upon a Time, rewatched that recently, and he doesn't give the explanation for why you should never eat pears. It's just one of the last things he says before he regenerates. He's talking to the future.
They do make your chin wet.
They do make. Now I remember what this whole deal was with
Right.
pears, which I think is a little unfair. I love pears. I think everyone should eat pears.
Ooh, they are a little
Right?
messy, though.
They can be a little messy, but this is why cutlery was invented. People,
Yeah.
use a nice slicing knife on your pears. You will not get any mess on your chin. Come on, doctor. I mean, about spoons. This much is clear. Maybe a paring knife, as it were, might be just the thing for you in this situation. But yeah, I think it's a little unfair towards pears, but I'm glad that we got the original version of this statement, so I know where it comes from. The thing that I'm still stuck on is, why Clara? Why is the Doctor always going on about his duty of care to Clara?
Right.
It's not a phrase he's used about any other companion. Is it something to do with her being the impossible girl? Is it something to do with his Matt Smith regeneration having kind of a crush on her having a crush on him? What is this about? It's never really explored or explained why he would go to the ends of the universe specifically for her, in a way that he wouldn't for, say, Amy and Rory, who are just sort of time-locked in Manhattan. And I guess, the Doc's like, oh, well, they had a good life. I'm not going to do anything like go to an extraction chamber to try and pull them out so I can revisit with my old friends here. But for some reason, Clara, what do you think it is about Clara?
Yeah, I don't have fully formed thoughts here, but here goes. Okay, so one, Doctor Who, I think as longtime super fans, you constantly have to remind you and I and others like us have to constantly remind ourselves to try to watch this show as sort of almost a casual viewer, and to people who sort of check in and out of the show. And I think to them, and thinking about that is like, companions are, every companion is the most important companion. You know what I mean? Like all the time, and comparing them, it's not. We do it, but it's like people don't, and like we want to imagine in watching the show the Doctor sort of cares equally for any other companion he would have, and it's always sort of this deep sort of bond they have.
He loves all his kids equally.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, because of the way she died, and he, I think it really, really blames himself for that. Like, he brought her into this life. She really took to it, got really bold and out of control and too reckless, certainly. But I think he blames himself for all of that. So because she dies in this very definitive way, it kind of wrecks him in a little bit. Like, especially because she's in her prime. I mean, she's a young woman. She has still so much life to live and so much to see just in an earthly life, even if she was able to live it. I think it really hurts him. And like we said in that podcast, like as far as companions who have actually died, there are really not that many, right? Like I mean, like
Right.
the last one was Adric, and
Yeah, and
so,
no one is going into the extraction chamber for Adric. I've
or
noticed.
are they?
Or are they?
Perhaps. There's a thing. We could pull out Matthew Waterhouse and dust him off. I mean, extraction chamber, and then I guess you age him. I don't know. You have to explain some way the difference, but yeah, exactly. Though, so I think it's the combination of those two things. You can kind of figure it out. But I would say, yeah, there's certainly been a lot made of that bond even before she died. So maybe it's I don't know. Maybe.
And when you have to keep telling us that there's a bond without actually necessarily showing us, I mean, they have pretty good chemistry as actors, and I like that they dialed down the flirty side of it when it went from Smith to Capaldi. I buy that they're friends, but do they have to keep shoving it in our faces how good friends they are? Like, if you have to keep saying that instead of just showing us, it seems a little bit of a plot crutch, as it were, that Moffat can keep returning to this motivation of the Doctor's always trying to say he's going to try and pull her out of time. He's going to, try to run away with her, and even though she doesn't have a heartbeat or any of this stuff, it's because of the duty of care, and he's going to turn into this monster because he cares about Clara so much.
You almost think Moffat wrote like a half dozen goodbye scenes between the two of them and was like, you know what, I love them all, I'm going to figure out a way to do every single one. Because think about how many scenes do they have. They have faced though actually, if you think about, go all the way back, right? Because if you think about the Dark Water Death in Heaven,
yep.
There was that, which was sort of, that wasn't really goodbye. Like he was very conscious, like they were just kind of cold and like not just bye-bye, but this is not over. But then there's something in the next one in the Christmas episode, because that was almost her final episode. So there was a little bit of that with her deathbed, right? Imagined, but it was there. And then you have Face the Raven, beautiful. Then you have this episode where there's kind of like a couple of scenes, right? There's the bit where they're in the cloisters where you don't really see the dialogue, but it's like there's clearly a moment. And then there's the actual goodbye. Then there's the diner. There's that one. And then we also have Twice Upon a Time, the cameo.
Yes.
So really, I think I just listed 7. Were you counting? I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. We're not even counting the the death of Souffle Girl, or the Clara splinters. By the way, I did like so many callbacks in Hellbent, and I do appreciate how many got jammed in. But I like the writing on the blackboard: "Run, you clever boy, and remember." Be a doctor, which is kind of nice. I also, there was a lovely moment where Capaldi stepped to one side so that all you could see on the blackboards were the words "boy" and "doctor," which, if you think about it, is a nice callback to listen. Callback to when Clara met the baby doctor.
Peter Capaldi, boy doctor, not what you would describe him as, I think, lately.
But yeah, a lot of nice touches like that, and the spoon calling back to Robot of Sherwood, and
that was so subtle. I missed it both times. I actually oh yeah. I read it. When I was reading one of the plot summaries online. I was like, oh, of course. How did you like seeing the Sisterhood of Carnigan?
Yeah, that definitely falls under the heading of Easter egg that wasn't particularly necessary.
I didn't mind it because it does give that resonance with Day of the Doctor and the War Doctor, and if that's kind of the point, I think it was like the Doctor's his dark side's coming out, and she sort of comes in to essentially scold him at a few times in the episode for doing that. That works. My thing is, how does she just walk into the High Council chair? Because it's like the president's like, you're not welcome here. Well, you do have control of the planet, so if you don't want her here, I think you could make her go.
Yeah. Timothy Dalton would have kicked her right out.
You use that glove.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe threaten with that glove a bit more. Maybe don't just use it as the last thing. Maybe, by the way, don't tell your soldiers to shoot when you could just wipe out the Doctor with your own glove.
Yeah.
Maybe just do the job yourself. Ohila is kind of, it's always nice to see her. I love that she came back for Night of the Doctor, which we talked about last time. She makes a great presence here, but again, with so much jammed into the plot, there's very little for her to do, except scold and to say that she came to watch the fireworks.
Right.
And to be sort of slightly the comic relief in a weird way at a few moments. But yeah, it's just bizarre. I wish you almost want to go back and sort of just extract one of. You want to go back to the extraction chamber the moment before Stephen Moffat hit print on this script, and just pull him out and just make a few tweaks and then stick it back in. But one of the things I think would be maybe as wonderfully atmospheric as those cloisters are down in the Matrix, with the the Daleks who said exterminate me. It's possibly the saddest Dalek in all of Doctor Who.
I got to say this is one of the things that I got tired of in the Capaldi era really quickly. Sorry, not the Moffat era really quickly, which is these gratuitous monster cameos, which are sprinkled throughout it was fine in what actually wasn't fine in the Pandorica Opens, but I tolerated it. And then it's everywhere. It's like every season finale and various episodes. You just
Time of the Doctor.
Yeah, you got to have the Weeping Angels at Trenzalore for no, what do the Weeping Angels care? You know what I mean? What is going on here? It's just super gratuitous, and he thinks it's. I get it. He's trying to relive some of those sort of fan moments that were so rare in the original series. When you have in Carnival of Monsters, just a brief view of a cyberhead or something like that would be and you kind of it's all one universe and this is so cool. But it's it gets really tiresome, and it's just it's clearly just done for fan service. Come on, man.
And it gets especially tiresome in The Matrix, where there's one moment where Clara encounters the Weeping Angels, I believe for the first time, unless she somehow encountered them on Trenzalore.
Or in a comic or something.
Yeah, but she doesn't know not to blink, and yet she manages to avoid getting attacked by the Weeping Angels because they're sort of tied up by the Matrix, but not really. And then, there's one point where she turns around and, a hand grasps her shoulder, and for a second you think, oh, Weeping Angel has got her. But no, it's a Cyberman hand, and we sort of, montage sequenced our way into the next monster. And then it's just, that sort of just takes away from the threat of the Weeping Angels. Right? It's just sort of
if it's a Weeping Angel episode, it's a Weeping Angel episode. This is some of the problems with, and even in some of the specific episodes Moffat's done, he doesn't do right by the monsters themselves. And if the angel can move that, I guess it still has tendrils on it, so it can't move that far, I guess is the point. But I don't know. The Cyberman, if he's grabbing her, how is her arm not broken? All this, it's just there for show, and it's I'd just rather you didn't. Just don't do it. If you can't do this monster justice, I don't want to see the monster.
And then the end of the result of all this, the reason the Doctor is going through into the Matrix is because there's a hole in the floor wherein he can steal some TARDISes.
Well, you can just get out. And I did like that line. I got to say, it was really clever where she's distracting them, which was neat. And she says, "Oh, they'll all be looking at me." And then the TARDIS appears around her, and she's like, "You were quick." He's like, "Well, time machine. I went back. It took me there might have been this whole other adventure he had that took hours."
There's another Big Finish hole just waiting to be filled. Capaldi's adventures in the Type 40 TARDIS is basically his only opportunity to do it before he picks up Clara.
But I will say with the cloisters and sort of getting out of there, I hate these sort of things where, and Moffat does this a lot too, where he raises the stakes and the difficulty level, or talks it up. He talks up the difficulty. Oh, once you're in, you'll never get out, and everything is trapped. And then the Doctor finds some trap door in 5 minutes, which because he was there when he was a kid, I guess, and also found it in 5 minutes. or what? Maybe it took him a half hour then. But it's like, oh, come on. Like, you can't just say this is, difficulty level 100 and then just pull that stuff, that Deus Ex Machina stuff. It's like, just say it's hard, and there's this, there's ways to do that without writing yourself into a corner and then people kind of rolling their eyes.
If you just had the Doctor steal the TARDIS, when he's on the lam from the General after the General's regenerated, you could have saved so many minutes in this episode, minutes that you could then put towards explaining the hybrid thing. Really, really defining the stakes and ramping up the tension. Instead, it feels like, we're on a Cook's tour of Doctor Who monsters, not spend long enough with each, perhaps at the exception of the Dalek, for it to be satisfying. Let's introduce a whole new kind of monster, the Cloister Wraiths, which I found them pretty scary. Yeah. Pretty scary. Time Lords with TV screens for faces, screaming as they float around. Nice, scary monster.
They were scary for what they looked like and what they're sort of implied to be. They're definitely not scary in terms of what they do, because you never see them do anything. Yes. Like that's the one thing that I don't like about them, and I think for me makes all the difference for monsters, which is why I quite like Cyberman stories where they actually show people being converted, and converted in a permanent sort of way, because that really underscores the horror of that monster and how high the stakes are when you encounter them. But like when you don't get the monster, give the monsters a chance to actually do their monstery stuff, you're kind of left either with your imagination, which can be good, it depends on how it's written, but here it's underwritten. It's just kind of, they're there, they look scary, they need to be developed more. I'd love to see them again. It's
a classic case of a disease that we should define as Moffat monster dilution. Just sort of, too many monsters dilutes the scariness of the individual ones.
Yeah, ultimately, here's my verdict. I think Stephen Moffat loved the relationship between the Doctor and Clara more than anyone else, and just really wanted to see that played up, and really every aspect of it emphasized and turned to 11 at every opportunity. And some of it really works. I mean, those are two very capable actors. It plays on a very, good relationship, the Doctor and his companion, and trying to sort of explore that in some interesting ways. So I give him some points for that, but I do think it was just too played out by this point. And as beautiful as some of those scenes are, it just gets repetitive after a while.
Oh, if you're going to go for it, just really go for it. Just have the courage of your convictions to make the whole episode about that. And don't give us all of these diversions with seeing Rassilon off the planet and, invading the entire Matrix, etc., etc. All of these scenes that could have been spent on building, the Keen theme. If you really want us to buy the Doctor and Clara relationship, then give us more scenes around that. Really emphasize the stakes around the hybrid and the end of the universe and blah, blah, blah. By the way, the prophecy that the hybrid will stand in the ruins of Gallifrey, and then that turning out to be Gallifrey is just burning at the end of time, and therefore the hybrid's just chilling in the ruins of Gallifrey, by the way, in an armchair, not standing. It's very much like the Shaggy Dog story of the prophecy in the Star Wars prequels, right? You refer to the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force. And then it turns out that Anakin Skywalker does bring balance to the Force by killing off all the Jedi, so there are only 2 Jedi left and 2 Sith left. And that's balance. Haha, we got you. We spent 3 movies and we got you. It's kind of what this feels like. It feels like he's just borrowing that. He was borrowing like one of the least popular Star Wars plots.
It feels like the appropriate TikTok duet here is the one where everybody goes and walks away from the camera. That's the pro. Okay, thanks everybody.
That's hybrid prophecy.
Going back to shows. Going back to Game of Thrones and whatever else. Okay. Hey, Chris. What would have happened if the evil plot succeeded?
I've been dreading this moment. It's a regular feature of the evil plot, because what is the evil plot in Hellbent? Is it? I presume it's Rassilon's?
No, man, it's the Doctor.
It is the Doctor's.
What if the Doctor actually just went off with Clara, consequence free, and didn't do the memory block or whatever? What do you think?
Then I guess
Nothing.
nothing exactly. They have more adventures. They have adventures with killer pears, and the Doctor finally learns never to eat a pear. Yeah, it just sort of would been like another season. Clara would have kept on acting recklessly. The Doctor would have kept on going on about his duty of care, and
well, since she can't be killed now, I guess. I mean, I guess they'd explore that, but it's like, then wouldn't she be even more reckless?
Yeah, exactly. And and the Doctor, meanwhile, I feel like he's got so much PTSD going on about Clara being killed that he's not gonna, even though she can't die, he's not gonna let her out of the TARDIS without wearing a scarf and mittens, and make sure her coat is buttoned all the way up, and wrap her in bubble wrap and be super protective. And I don't know. Okay. But what, Pete? What if the evil plot was actually Rassilon's?
Okay, so Rassilon's plot was to just kill the Doctor or find the stop the hybrid. I guess
trap the Doctor in a confession dial until he actually said what he knew about the hybrid.
Well, that was the last episode, so we have to start with this episode where he's already out, and it's like Rassilon wants to. Well, he doesn't want to kill the Doctor right away. He wants to. I don't know.
He wants to get the Doctor
to heal.
He wants to get the Doctor through all of his regenerations. Yeah, I guess he wants the Doctor on side. He wants the Doctor playing ball, and using his fame for Rassilon's own ends, I guess.
So what if the Doctor blinks when the soldiers are about to shoot him, and he goes like, "All right, I've got the information. Take me to your leader." So then he doesn't have. Can he get Clara out with the extraction chamber? I don't know.
I mean, this brings up a super confusing thing of what was it? I mean, I think I remember Heaven Sent pretty well. I don't remember any sort of interrogation scene where they're asking him what he knows about the hybrid. It's just he's being pursued by the spooky ghost monster thing around the castle, right? And keeps dying, and then keeps being remade, and he keeps punching through a wall, and it's not. Where was the interrogation scene in that?
Yeah,
anyway,
that's the whole thing with that episode, because informed by this episode, you're kind of like, oh well, if that was the point, was to get him to confess.
Yeah,
how did he know that?
And this is why we made them separate stories in the Codex, people.
Yeah,
because they belong separately. They make better sense that way. Yeah, I guess if the Doctor had blinked and Rassilon gets him on side, and then the Doctor becomes the new face of Rassilon's Gallifrey, almost like he did with the monks, right? And Lie of the Land, right? It became their propaganda mouthpiece. I guess he would end up doing the same for Rassilon,
I guess, and then starts planning his revolution.
Yeah.
And does Clara ever come back? I don't know. Depends. I think the whole thing the Doctor wanted to have that sort of idea, she knows about the hybrid, or I could find out about the hybrid through her, so I need to extract her. I think you could still do that with Rassilon.
Let me just create massive chaos in the entire Gallifreyan political system by removing the leader, removing the entire leadership, and I'm only going to do it so I can become president and then use the extraction chamber.
Yeah.
I mean, that is recklessness on a level beyond what we've seen with the Doctor in the past. Certainly when it comes to, quote unquote, my planet, if he cares about it so much, why is he thrusting it into anarchy?
Why doesn't he stay there, man? Why don't you marry it?
They do. I mean, I do. Again, this episode is lovely in parts. If you watch any sort of 5-minute chunk of Hellbent, it's really cool, right? You know the wider context, and there's that one part where Me finally asks him at the end of time, why do you keep returning to the Earth so much? Is it this half human theory from the TV movie that would explain it? And that sort of does need explaining, and that's nice, but again, walks away from it.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, the whole question of how, it can't even give us the answer to the question of how is me surviving in this bubble at the end of time?
Right.
And she just says something like beautifully, or, how did you establish that giant reality bubble? Beautifully. Or cleverly. I forget exactly what she says, but it's can't you just explain one thing, please?
Come on, Steven. Give us something here. Yeah. It's all
hand
he writes
wavy.
himself into a corner and he just hand waves himself out of it. It is what it is. All right, sir. I would say the final verdict in this one, I'm still going to give it a Dalek because it's nice and shiny and it adds the moments that I think are great, and because it's a send off for Jenna Coleman for real, I think it works. It works pretty well.
It's a good episode. It's less than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a self-defeating Dalek who wants you to exterminate him.
Oh yeah, sounds about right. But it's still there, and you just can't bring yourself to do it.
You can't. Just walk away. Just walk away from it, man. It's like with Hellbent. We can't do anything about this mess. Let's just walk away from it pleasantly. Not even ask about the 4 knocks or whether the 4 knocks from Listen had anything to do with the 4 knocks from Hellbent.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was the end of time.
It goes to the end of time and Listen.
What is with Moffat in the end of time? He just loves going there.
And I mean, we RTD did it as well, right? With Utopia. That took us to the very end.
Okay, I wasn't gonna. I thought better of bringing this up, but since you brought it up, I'm going to talk about it. Which is that episode talked about that being 100 trillion years plus in the future, and here I don't know if it's ever really spelled out, but it's sort of implied that it's only a few billion years in the future. Which is okay, we're humans and whatever, who cares? But I kind of care. It's like the far future where it's the end of the universe. I mean, that should be pretty far out there, shouldn't it? We should be talking trillions at least.
Yeah. When is the end of the universe to you anyway?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, this is based on modern science today in 2021. The universe never ends, and it could basically go to the infinite future, and at some ungodly scale, the atoms are now the size of bigger than the current universe today. You could go on and on and on, but it's that's way past the point where all stars and heat and whatever in the universe is just gone, right? So I guess that's what they're talking about, which is to say, there's the final couple of embers until the final phase of the infinite future.
It's all entropy.
Yeah,
right. That's what's supposed to happen. The big freeze, the heat death of the universe. It's going to take up to 100 trillion years, and it's not going to be as neat as Doctor Who suggests.
Yeah.
But anyway, watch as the randomizer now takes us to another end of the universe.
It's time, everyone. Okay, the randomizer has been on a streak lately of being rather direct about.
Really,
definitely has bad mind of that. It's almost too obvious where it's been taking us. So I'm honestly we like to talk about the randomizer and we love to give it challenges. Well, first, Chris, again, tell us what is the randomizer for our new viewers.
So, computers are notoriously bad at generating random numbers. Therefore, we use the services of random.org, which allow you to choose a random number between 2 given numbers by looking at atmospheric noise, atoms bouncing around the atmosphere, which seems so Doctor Who-ish that we just couldn't resist using that. And we have identified 297 discrete Doctor Who stories, not episodes, but stories, throughout the entire run of the show. And Pete, you have the codex open.
I have the codex, and I'm just marking my recent edits for version 2 is something non-canonical currently, but we will. That's just integrating flux. But we're gonna that edition has not been published.
It's non-official.
We still stop at 297, which is Revolution of the Daleks. And it is time. I think it is time to use the executor.
All right. Do you want to issue a challenge?
I do. Give us something random. I want to see no connections. I want to see all right, this random episode, something.
I'm going to be super. I'm going to do the opposite and just say super specifically, it's obvious, randomizer, you want to take us to listen. You love Capaldi, you love the Capaldi era, you love Clara, and you love the barn, the Doctor's barn. So take us to the only other episode to feature a barn. Watch As It Now takes us to a classic episode that I never knew featured a barn. So,
yeah,
but probably a crappy barn on the edge of a quarry. All right, we're ready.
You're putting all your chips on like a single number, like in roulette. This is amazing.
That's right.
And I'm
like, feeling lucky,
man. I don't care.
It's a one shot out of 297 possibilities.
All righty. Are we ready with the executor? I'm ready with the codex.
Count me down.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
224.
Okay.
That sounds like someone who's already been.
Late. 224. Oh, it is our first Smith episode. It is the God Complex.
First Smith, not counting Day of the Doctor.
Oh, that's correct. Yeah.
Solo Smith.
Solo Smith. Yes.
The God Complex. I can't even remember the God Complex.
Oh, the God Complex. Yeah, this is a good one. It's a surprising one. It's very unusual because it's all about them going to this sort of weird hotel, retro hotel, where Amy, Rory, and the Doctor, the people there are getting stalked strangely by some weird creature that in their rooms, and it has something to do with their psychology. And the whole place, they can't get out of the place. It's very weird. And it becomes this very unexpected episode. Yeah. I don't want to throw too many spoilers out there, but I remember liking this one.
Interesting. Yeah. As soon as you said the word hotel, I was like, okay, that identifies it in time and space for me. Very few hotel-based Doctor Who stories. Yeah. Cool. Matt Smith, finally.
Matt Smith, finally, for reals.
And I believe there are some Weeping Angel references in this.
There may be. Actually, I don't remember. There's definitely references to some monsters, though. And anyway, we'll save it for then. But tune in to us then at your local podcast app. This is Pull to Open. It's a podcast. It's a Doctor Who podcast where we randomly go through every episode of the TV series. If you have not yet subscribed to us, please do. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Breaker, Google, all the good podcast apps that you know and love. As I said at the beginning, please leave us a review. We love those 5-star reviews, but we'd be happy to hear from you no matter what you want to say. Also follow us on the socials. We're super active on TikTok. We're at Pull to Open on TikTok, all one word, obviously, and on Twitter and Instagram as well at Pull to Open 63. We're sharing a few things there as well. So please tune into us wherever we are. Drop us a line and leave a review if you can. Chris, looking forward to visiting the God Complex with you.
Indeed, I'm ready to check in anytime I like, and I believe that I can never leave.
That's right.
This hotel.
It's a podcast that will go on forever and ever. I'm sure our listeners can't wait. Okay, folks, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.